New York in the late 1800s was a booming metropolis, and its well-to-do residents assumed it was the desire of every American to see what they thought to be the most wonderful city in the Union. There was certainly a wealth of avenues, edifices, and entertainments to impress any visitor who, in an age before photography was widespread, had only heard of its splendor. They read of light and magnificence, but there was, unknown to most outsiders, darkness and squalor too, so terrible that it could make any visitor into a victim. In a mysterious and bewildering city, the unwary could easily be plunged into a life of crime and destitution. In the dangerous back streets of Lower Manhattan, there was many a disreputable saloon, dance hall, and bawdy house where scoundrels trapped the unsuspecting. Today, in an account from the 1860s by James McCabe, a 19th century author and historian, you will hear how women, often immigrants from Europe or distant parts of America, were drawn into a life of crime and prostitution in shameful dance halls and concert saloons, from which there was little chance of escape. Discover how evil proprietors forced women into a life of servitude in outwardly flashy, but hellish, underground dens where men, who came to be entertained by pretty waiter girls, were fleeced for cash, and if they didn't lose their money to exorbitant drink, fixed gambling, pickpockets, or violence, were lucky to leave with their lives. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us continue bringing the past alive. There are about 75 or 80 concert saloons in New York, employing abandoned women as waitresses. The flashiest of these are located on Broadway, there being nearly 20 of these infamous places on the great thoroughfare between Spring and 4th Streets. During the day they are closed, but one of the most prominent sets out before its doors a large frame containing 20 or 30 exquisite card photographs, and bearing these words, "Portraits of the young ladies employed in this saloon." It is needless to say that the pictures are taken at random from the stock of some photograph dealer, and have no connection whatever with the hags employed in the saloon. The Bowery, Chatham Street, and some of the streets leading from Broadway contain the greater number of these concert saloons. The majority are located in the basements of the buildings, but one or two of the Broadway establishments use second-story rooms. These places may be recognized by their numerous gaudy transparencies and lamps, and by the discordant strains of music which float up into the street from them. The Broadway saloons are owned by a few scoundrels, many of them being conducted by the same proprietor. A writer in the New York World was recently favored with the following truthful description of these places by one of the best-known proprietors. "A concert saloon is a gin mill on an improved plan. That's all, my friend. I don't pay the girls any wages. They get a percentage on the drinks they sell. Some saloon keepers pay their girls regular wages, and a small percentage besides. But it don't work. The girls won't work unless they have to. Now, my girls get a third of whatever they sell. The consequence is, they sell twice as much as they would if they was on wages. You never can get people to work faithfully for you unless they can make money by it. The liquor is cheap, and I don't mind telling you it's dead nasty. Then we charge double prices for it. Now, I charge 20 cents for drinks that a regular gin mill would sell for 10. Then there are a lot of drinks that the girls takes themselves, which we charge us 50 cents for. They don't cost us more than 4 or 5, but after a girl has said what she'll take and a man has ordered it, he can't go back on the price. Then hardly any man stops at less than 2 or 3 drinks here, when he would take only one at a bar. The lights are the same as they would be anywhere else, and the music don't cost much. Then there's other ways to make in this business, but you don't want to know all about the speculations. There's Keno, for instance. a game of chance played by choosing numbers. The Keno business is attached to lots of saloons. You see, the girls manage to get young fellows that come here, like those hounds yonder, pretty full, and then they says, "Why don't you try your luck in the next room, and go shares with me?" So the fool, he bites at once, and goes in for Keno. Of course, luck goes against him, for he's too drunk to play. The game's a square one, and he finally comes back for another drink. The girls then takes care that he doesn't go away till he's too drunk to remember where he lost his money. Even if he goes away sober, he seldom splits. I'll give the fellows that much credit. Bad as they are, they seldom splits. The concert saloons derive their names from the fact that a low order of music is provided by the proprietor as a cover to the real character of the place. It may be an old cracked piano with a single, half-drunken performer, or a couple or more musicians who cannot by any possible means draw melody from their wheezy instruments. Persons entering these places assume a considerable risk. They voluntarily place themselves in the midst of a number of abandoned wretches who are ready for any deed of violence or crime. They care for nothing but money, and will rob or kill for it. Respectable people have no business in such places. They are very apt to have their pockets picked, and are in danger of violence. Many men, who leave their happy homes in the morning, visit these places for amusement, or through curiosity. At night, they are drugged, robbed, murdered, and then the harbour police may find their lifeless forms floating in the river at daybreak. The women known outside of the city as pretty waiter girls are simply a collection of poor wretches who have gone down almost to the end of their fatal career. They may retain faint vestiges of their former beauty, but that is all. They are beastly, foul-mouthed, brutal wretches. Very many of them are half dead with consumption and disease. They are in every respect disgusting. Yet young and old men, strangers and citizens, come here to talk with them and spend their money on them, says the writer I have quoted after describing a characteristic scene in one of these places. The only noticeable thing about this exhibition of beastliness is the utter unconcern of the other occupants of the room. They are accustomed to it. One wonders, too, at the attraction this has for strangers. There is really nothing in the people, the place, or the onlookers worthy of a decent man's curiosity. The girls are, without exception, the nastiest, most besotted drabs that ever walk the streets. They haven't even the pride that clings to certain of their sisters who are in prison. The whole assemblage, with the exception of such stragglers as myself, who has a motive in studying it, is a mess of the meanest human rubbish that a great city exudes. In the company there is a large preponderance of the cub of 17 and 18. Some of these boys are the sons of merchants and lawyers, and are seeing life. If they were told to go into their kitchens at home and talk with the cook and the chambermaid, they would consider themselves insulted. Yet they come here and talk with other girls, every whit as ignorant and unattractive as the servants at home. Only the latter are virtuous, and these are infamous. Thus does one touch of vileness make the whole world kin. The dance houses differ from the concert saloons in this respect, that they are one grade lower both as regards the inmates and the visitors, and that dancing as well as drinking is carried on in them. They are owned chiefly by men, though there are some which are the property of and are managed by women. They are located in the worst quarters of the city, generally in the streets near the east and north rivers, in order to be easy of access to the sailors. The buildings are greatly out of repair, and have a rickety, dirty appearance. The main entrance leads to a long, narrow hall, the floor of which is well sanded. The walls are ornamented with flashy prints, and the ceiling with coloured tissue paper cut in various fantastic shapes. There is a bar at the farther end of the room, which is well stocked with the meanest liquors, and chairs and benches are scattered about. From 5 to a dozen women, so bloated and horrible to look upon that a decent man shudders with disgust as he beholds them, are lounging about the room. They have reached the last step in the downward career of fallen women, and will never leave this place until they are carried out from it to their graves, which are not too far distant. They are miserably clad, and are nearly always half crazy with liquor. They are cursed and kicked about by the brutal owner of the place, and suffer still greater violence, at times, in the drunken brawls for which these houses are famous. Their sleeping rooms are above. They are sought by sailors and by the lowest and most degraded of the city population. They are the slaves of their masters. They have no money of their own. He claims a part of their infamous earnings and demands the rest for board and clothes. Few have the courage to fly from these hells, and if they make the attempt, they are forced back by the proprietor, who is frequently aided in this unholy act by the law of the land. They cannot go into the streets naked, and he claims the clothes on their backs as his property. If they leave the premises with these clothes on, he charges them with theft. Let no one suppose that these women entered upon this grade of their wretched life voluntarily. Many were drugged and forced into it. But the majority are lost women who have come regularly down the ladder to this depth. You can find in these hells women who, but a few years ago, were ornaments of society. No woman who enters upon a life of shame can hope to avoid coming to these places in the end. As sure as she takes the first step in sin, she will take the last one also, struggle against it as she may. This is the last depth. It has but one bright ray in all its darkness. It does not last over a few months, for death soon ends it. But oh, the horrors of such a death! No human being who has not looked on such a deathbed can imagine the horrible form in which the great destroyer comes. There is no hope. The poor wretch passes from untold misery in this life to the doom which awaits those who die in their sins. The keepers of these wretched places use every art to entice young and innocent women into their dens, where they are ruined by force. The police frequently rescue women from them who have been enticed into them or carried there by force. Immigrant girls who have strolled from the depot at Castle Garden into the lower part of the city are decoyed into these places by being promised employment. Men and women are sent into the country districts to ensnare young girls to these city hells. Advertisements for employment are answered by these wretches, and every art is exhausted in the effort to draw pure women within the walls of the dance house. Let such a woman once cross the threshold, and she will be drugged or forced to submit to her ruin. This accomplished, she will not be allowed to leave the place until she has lost all hope of giving up the life into which she has been driven. The missionaries are constant visitors to these dens. They go with hope that they may succeed in rescuing some poor creature from her terrible life. As a rule, they meet with the vilest abuse and are driven away with curses, but sometimes they are successful. During the present winter, they have succeeded in effecting a change for the better in one of the most notorious women in Water Street. Harry Hill is a well-known man among the disreputable classes of New York. He is the proprietor of the largest and best-known dance house in the city. His establishment is in Houston Street, a few doors west of Mulberry Street, and almost under the shadow of the police headquarters. It is in full sight from Broadway, and at night a huge red and blue lantern marks the entrance door. Near the main entrance there is a private door for women. They are admitted free, as they constitute the chief attraction to the men who visit the place. Entering through the main door, the visitor finds himself in a low bar room, very much like the other establishments of the kind in the neighborhood. Passing between the counters, he reaches a door in the rear of them which opens into the dance hall, which is above the level of the barroom. Visitors to this hall are charged an entrance fee of 25 cents and are expected to call for refreshments as soon as they enter. Harry Hill is generally present during the evening, moving about among his guests. He is a short, thick-set man with a self-possessed, resolute air and a face indicative of his calling, and is about 54 years old. He is sharp and decided in his manner, and exerts himself to maintain order among his guests. He is enough of a politician to be very sure that the authorities will not be severe with him in case of trouble, but he has a horror of having his place entered by the police in their official capacity. He enforces his orders with his fists, if necessary, and hustles refractory guests from his premises without hesitating. The fancy generally submit to his commands, as they know he is a formidable man when antagonized. He keeps his eye on everything, and though he has a business manager, conducts the whole establishment himself. He has been in his wretched business 15 years, and is said to be wealthy. His profits have been estimated as high as $50,000 per annum. Harry Hill boasts that he keeps a respectable house, but his establishment is nothing more than one of the many gates to hell with which the city abounds. There are no girls attached to the establishment. All the guests of both sexes are merely outsiders who come here to spend the evening. The rules of the house are printed in rhyme and are hung in the most conspicuous parts of the hall. They are rigid and prohibit any indecent or boisterous conduct or profane swearing. The most disreputable characters are seen in the audience, but no thieving or violence ever occurs within the hall. Whatever happens after persons leave the place, the proprietor allows no violation of the law within his doors. The hall itself consists simply of a series of rooms which have been knocked into one by the removal of the partition walls. As all these rooms were not of the same height, the ceiling presents a curious patchwork appearance. A long counter occupies one end of the hall, at which refreshments and liquors are served. There is a stage at the other side, on which low farces are performed, and a tall Punch and Judy box occupies a conspicuous position. Benches and chairs are scattered about, and a raised platform is provided for the orchestra, which consists of a piano, violin, and a bass viol. The centre of the room is a clear space, and is used for dancing. If you do not dance, you must leave, unless you atone for your deficiency by a liberal expenditure of money. The amusements are coarse and low. The songs are broad, and are full of blasphemous outbursts, which are received with shouts of delight. You will see all sorts of people at Harry Hill's. The women are, of course, women of the town, but they are either just entering upon their career or still in its most prosperous phase. They are all handsomely dressed, and some of them are very pretty. Some of them have come from the better classes of society, and have an elegance and refinement of manner and conversation, which win them many admirers in the crowd. They drink deep and constantly during the evening. Indeed, one is surprised to see how much liquor they imbibe. The majority come here early in the evening alone, but few go away without company for the night. You do not see the same face here very long. The women cannot escape the inevitable doom of the lost sisterhood. They go down the ladder, and Harry Hill keeps his place clear of them after the first flush of their beauty and success is past. You will then find them in the 5 Points and Water Street hells, infamous slums in 19th century New York. As for the men, they represent all kinds of people and professions. You may see here men high in public life, side by side with the 5 Points ruffian. Judges, lawyers, policemen off duty and in plain clothes, officers of the Army and Navy, merchants, bankers, editors, soldiers, sailors, clerks, and even boys mingle here in friendly confusion. As the profits of the establishment are derived from the bar, drinking is, of course, encouraged, and the majority of the men are more or less drunk all the time. They spend their money freely in such a condition. Harry Hill watches the course of affairs closely during the evening. If he knows a guest and likes him, he will take care that he is not exposed to danger. After he is too far gone in liquor to protect himself, he will either send him home or send for his friends. If the man is a stranger, he does not interfere. Only, no crime must be committed in his house. Thieves, pickpockets, burglars, roughs, and pugilists are plentifully scattered through the audience. These men are constantly on the watch for victims. It is easy for them to drug the liquor of a man they are endeavouring to secure without the knowledge of the proprietor of the house, or, if they do not tamper with his liquor, they can persuade him to drink to excess. In either case, they lead him from the hall, under pretence of taking him home. He never sees home until they have stripped him of all his valuables. Sometimes he finds his long home in less than an hour after leaving the hall, and the harbour police find his body floating on the tide at sunrise. Women frequently decoy men to places where they are robbed. No crime is committed in the dance hall, but plans are laid there, victims are marked, and tracked to loss or death, and frequently an idle, thoughtless visit there has been the beginning of a life of ruin. The company to be met with is that which ought to be shunned. Visits from curiosity are dangerous. Stay away. To be found on the devil's ground is voluntarily to surrender yourself a willing captive to him. Stay away. It is a place in which no virtuous woman is ever seen, and in which an honest man ought to be ashamed to show his face.